The ancient engines of HS Determination thrummed through the deck plates, their steady pulse a reminder of an era when ships were built to last. Captain Sarah Chen felt every vibration through the soles of her boots as she stood at the command station, her eyes fixed on the tactical display where 12 crystalline shapes had just appeared in high orbit around Ta City's largest colony. "Signal coming in from the surface, Captain," Communications Officer James Park announced, his fingers dancing across his console's worn interface. "They're broadcasting on all frequencies." Chen nodded, her expression remaining calm despite the flutter of anxiety in her stomach. "Put it through." The voice that filled the bridge crackled with static and desperation. "This is Governor Martinez of New Montana Colony. We have multiple unknown vessels in orbit. Our automated defense systems are. They're not responding. If anyone can hear this, we have 50,000 civilians here. Please, we need immediate assistance." The tactical display updated as more data streamed in. The alien vessels sparkled like diamonds against the void, their crystalline hulls refracting starlight in ways that made them difficult to track. Even the Determination's older sensors struggled to maintain a lock. "Vraxians," Lieutenant Emma Powell said from her tactical station, her voice tight. "Latest intelligence says those are Sterrever-class battleships. Each one carries enough firepower to level a continent." Chen's fingers traced the edge of her command console, feeling the subtle marks and scratches earned over 3 decades of service. The Determination was old, a Marathon-class destroyer that should have been decommissioned years ago. But here she was, the only military vessel within range of a colony about to face extinction. "The nearest response fleet?" Chen asked, though she already knew the answer. 36 hours at best speed, Captain," Park replied. "And that's if they left the moment we got this signal." The bridge fell silent save for the steady hum of the engines and the soft beeping of sensor arrays. Chen studied the tactical display, noting something peculiar about the alien formation. Their ships moved with perfect precision, probably guided by quantum computers and AI systems far more advanced than anything humanity possessed. But there was an almost mechanical predictability to their movements. "Chief Rodriguez," Chen called over the internal comm. "What's the status of our reactor?" Down in engineering, Marcus Rodriguez looked up from his diagnostic panel, wiping grease from his hands. "She's running smooth, Captain. These old fusion cores might not be pretty, but they're reliable. Just don't ask me to push her past 90%. "What about the magnetic containment systems?" "The original Mark VII containment field generators. Most ships got those stripped out years ago, but previous captain insisted on keeping ours. Said something about preferring systems he could fix with a wrench." Chen allowed herself a small smile. "Good. Standby engineering. Powell, start running scenarios. I want to know every quirk and limitation of those crystal ships." "Mom." Powell looked up from her station. "We're not actually thinking of engaging them, are we? The Determination is exactly where she needs to be," Chen finished. "Those colonists don't have 36 hours, and I don't intend to give them a lesson in modern ship design while their homes burn." The captain turned to face her bridge crew, seeing the mixture of fear and determination in their eyes. They knew the odds. A 30-year-old destroyer against 12 advanced alien warships wasn't a battle. It was barely even a suicide mission. But they also knew what would happen to the colony if they fled. "Park, send a message to Fleet Command," Chen ordered. "Inform them that the HS Determination is moving to engage hostile forces at Ta City. Then get me a channel to the colony." As her crew rushed to comply, Chen watched the alien ships continuing their perfect, predictable dance above the colony. They were beautiful, in their way, all straight lines and precise angles, like mathematical equations given form. But Chen had learned long ago that space battles weren't won by equations alone. The Determination's engines rose in pitch as she turned toward her destiny, carrying 50 years of human ingenuity and determination toward what would either be her finest hour or her last moment among the stars. Chief Engineer Marcus Rodriguez stood in the heart of the Determination's engineering section, staring at a diagnostic readout that shouldn't have been possible. He'd been running standard power conversion tests when he noticed something odd about the reactor's magnetic containment frequencies. "Run it again," he ordered his assistant, Lisa Chen. "Full spectrum analysis this time." The ancient computer churned through the calculations, its cooling fans whirring with effort. The results painted themselves across the screen in familiar green text, showing exactly the same pattern as before. "This can't be right," Lisa muttered, adjusting her toolkit. "The resonance patterns are perfect," Rodriguez finished, a slow smile spreading across his face. "They're perfect because they're imperfect. Get me the bridge." Up on the command deck, Captain Chen was reviewing tactical scenarios when Rodriguez's call came through. "Go ahead, Chief." "Captain, you know how the Mark 7 containment system uses that weird oscillating frequency that gave everyone headaches back in the Academy. Turns out those crystal ships up there are broadcasting shield harmonics in exactly the opposite wavelength." Lieutenant Powell's head snapped up from her tactical station. "Wait, are you saying their shields are vulnerable to our reactor signature?" "Better than that," Rodriguez replied, excitement clear in his voice. "Every modern ship in the fleet got upgraded with the Mark 9 containment system. The only reason we still have the 7 is because it was too expensive to retrofit. We're literally the only ship in the sector that could hit them with this frequency." Chen leaned forward in her chair. "How can you be sure?" "Because I'm looking at their shield modulation patterns right now. Modern sensors would filter these frequencies out as noise since they don't match any known weapons. But our old systems, they see everything." Powell was already running simulations on her console. "He's right, Captain. Their shield geometry is built around perfect crystalline matrices. They're expecting precision energy weapons, not the messy resonance patterns from our outdated reactor." "And how do we use this advantage?" Chen asked, though she was already beginning to see the possibilities. "Give me 2 hours, Rodriguez said. "I need to recalibrate some power conduits and bypass about 30 years of safety protocols. But I think I can turn our reactor signature into a weapon that they'll never see coming." Chen studied the tactical display, watching the Vraxian ships maintain their perfect formation. "You have 1 hour, Chief. They won't wait forever." As Rodriguez signed off to begin his modifications, Powell made a discovery of her own. "Captain, look at this," she called out, sending data to the main screen. "Their targeting systems are all quantum-based, designed to track and predict the movement of modern ships using advanced algorithms. And our targeting computer is analog. It's not making predictions. It's just tracking what it sees. Their electronic countermeasures are useless against it because they're designed to fool eye targeting systems, not human operators." Chen felt a spark of hope ignite in her chest. The determination might be old, but she was starting to look less obsolete and more specialized. "What about our weapons?" "Basic coil guns and plasma torpedoes," Powell replied. "Nothing fancy, but they're simple and reliable. No quantum entanglement or probability fields to disrupt." "Simple is good," Chen nodded. "Simple means fewer things to go wrong." Over the next hour, the Determination hummed with activity. Rodriguez and his engineering team rerouted power systems and modified containment fields, while Powell's tactical crew recalibrated weapons and ran targeting drills. The old ship seemed to come alive under their attention, as if she knew she was being prepared for the fight of her life. Chen watched it all from her command chair, listening to the reports flow in and feeling the subtle changes in the ship's vibrations. The Vraxians undoubtedly saw them as primitive, using technology that should have been retired decades ago. But sometimes the old ways were the best ways, and humanity had learned its lessons about warfare long before reaching the stars. "Engineering to bridge." Rodriguez's voice crackled through the comm. "We're ready, Captain. It's not pretty, but it'll work." Chen straightened in her chair. "All hands, battle stations. Let's show them what this old ship can do. The asteroid field between the Determination and the Vraxian fleet looked like a graveyard of dead worlds, filled with chunks of rock ranging from pebbles to mountains. Captain Chen watched the tactical display as their ship slipped between the spinning masses, each movement precisely calculated yet appearing random to outside observers. "Proximity alert," Lieutenant Powell announced, her voice steady. "Largest asteroid passing at 300 meters. Chen nodded, feeling the subtle shift as their old ship's thrusters made minor corrections. Modern vessels would have relied on their shields, letting their computers plot safe courses through the debris. But the Determination's thick hull, built in an era before perfect shield harmonics, could handle a few scratches. "Status of the mining charges?" Chen asked. "All 6 deployed and powered down," Powell replied. "They're reading as natural iron deposits on scanners. The Vraxians won't spot them unless they do a detailed mineral survey." Rodriguez's voice came through from engineering. "Reactor containment fields are oscillating at maximum variance, ready to trigger the resonance pulse on your command." The bridge crew worked in focused silence as the Determination emerged from behind a tumbling asteroid the size of a small moon. 2 Vraxian frigates hung in space before them, their crystalline hulls splitting starlight into rainbow patterns. They were beautiful, Chen thought, like abstract sculptures made of diamond and light. "They're scanning us," Park reported from communications, "getting standard identification queries. Wait, they're powering up weapons." "Now," Chen ordered. The Determination's reactor pulse hit the nearest Vraxian ship before its crew could react. The invisible wave of energy matched the exact inverse frequency of their shield harmonics, creating a cascading resonance that shattered their defensive matrix. The alien vessel's perfect crystalline form suddenly seemed fragile, like ice about to crack. "First mining charge," Powell called out, her fingers dancing across her tactical console. The explosive device, hidden in a nearby asteroid, detonated with precise timing. The blast wasn't particularly powerful, but it sent a spray of rock fragments directly into the Vraxian ship's now unshielded hull. Tiny pieces of stone, accelerated to incredible speeds, pierced the beautiful crystal structure like needles through glass. The second Vraxian frigate turned to respond, its weapon ports glowing with gathered energy. But the Determination was already moving, using the debris cloud from the first explosion as cover. Their old targeting systems, unbothered by the electronic warfare that would have blinded modern sensors, locked onto the enemy vessel with mechanical precision. "Fire port broadside," Chen commanded. "Full spread." Ancient coil guns thundered, sending streams of metallic projectiles through space. The Vraxian ship's predictive algorithms, expecting energy weapons or guided missiles, failed to account for the simple kinetic assault. Their remaining shields flared and sparked, trying to deflect the physical impacts. Third mining charge, Mark. Another explosion rocked the battlefield, this time catching the second Vraxian ship from behind. Caught between the Determination's barrage and the asteroid field's deadly shrapnel, its shields collapsed under the strain. The crystalline vessel's hull began to fracture, lines of structural damage spreading like cracks in a frozen pond. "Both targets disabled," Powell reported, allowing herself a small smile. "Their cores are going critical. They're abandoning ship." Chen watched as escape pods launched from the crippled vessels, their occupants no doubt shocked that their advanced warships had fallen to such primitive tactics. But she knew they couldn't celebrate yet. The main Vraxian fleet would have detected the battle, and they would be coming in force. "Damage report. Hull integrity at 92%, Rodriguez replied. "Some minor scarring from debris impacts, but nothing the old girl can't handle." "Good," Chen said, already studying the tactical display for their next move, "because we've just kicked the hornet's nest." "Park, are you picking up any chatter from their fleet?" "Yes, Captain. They're coordinating a full hunting formation. All remaining ships are moving to box us in." Chen allowed herself a grim smile. They'd won the first round through surprise and ingenuity, But the real test was just beginning. The Vraxians would be ready for their tricks now, which meant it was time to think of some new ones. "Take us back into the field," she ordered. "Nice and quiet. Let's see how their perfect formations handle a little chaos." Darkness filled the bridge of the Determination, broken only by the dim glow of essential displays. The ship drifted through the void, her engines cold, her systems running on minimal power. Captain Chen sat motionless in her command chair, listening to the shallow breathing of her crew as they waited. "Contact," Powell whispered, her voice barely audible over the dying hum of their powered-down systems. 3 Vraxian ships passing at 20,000 kilometers. Their search pattern is expanding. Chen didn't respond immediately. Modern ships couldn't run this dark. Their automated systems required too much power, their crews too dependent on computer assistance. But the Determination was from a different era, when ships had to be ready for everything, even operating on emergency power alone. Temperature in engineering reaching critical levels, Rodriguez reported through a hand-powered comm unit. They couldn't risk using the ship's internal communications. "Another 2 hours at most before we need to restart thermal regulation." The Determination hung in space like a dead thing, floating among the scattered rocks and ice at the system's edge. They'd been playing this game for 3 days now, powering up only when absolutely necessary, letting momentum carry them through the darkness, while the Vraxian fleet searched in ever-widening patterns. "Second group approaching," Park murmured from his station. "Their search algorithms are becoming more random. They're learning." Chen closed her eyes, visualizing the space around them. The Vraxians were adapting, breaking away from their rigid patterns. But they were still thinking like advanced beings, looking for energy signatures and quantum fluctuations that no human ship should be able to hide. "Patch in the passive sensors," she ordered softly. "Let's see what they're saying to each other." Park carefully adjusted a series of manual dials, bringing in the faint whispers of electromagnetic radiation. The Vraxian communications were heavily encrypted, of course, but their basic patterns told a story. They were frustrated, confused by the disappearance of a primitive vessel that should have been easy to track. "Hull temperature differential increasing," Powell noted. "We'll start showing up on thermal scans soon." Chen nodded slowly. They couldn't hide forever. The question was whether they'd hidden long enough to make the Vraxians doubt themselves, to break their perfect formations and practiced responses. A slight vibration ran through the deck plates, barely noticeable, but enough to make Chen's eyes snap open. What was that? "Ice impact," Rodriguez whispered back. "Small chunk, maybe baseball-sized. No damage, but..." He didn't need to finish. Even a tiny impact could create a debris pattern that might give away their position. The bridge crew held their breath as one of the Vraxian ships changed course, moving closer to investigate. Its crystalline hull caught the light of distant stars, creating strange patterns in the darkness. They were close enough now to see it with the naked eye through the bridge viewport. Minutes stretched like hours as the alien vessel passed within 5 kilometers of their position. So close that its active sensors were actually reflecting off the Determination's hull, but finding nothing because they were calibrated to detect powered systems and energy emissions, not cold metal in space. "They're moving off," Powell finally reported, returning to their search pattern. Chen allowed herself to exhale slowly. "Status of the colony?" "Still holding," Park replied. "The Vraxians are maintaining their blockade, but they haven't started bombardment. They know we're still out here somewhere, and that was the real victory," Chen realized. Every hour they kept the Vraxian fleet searching was another hour the colony survived, another hour closer to reinforcements arriving. They'd turned their disadvantages into advantages, using their old ship's limitations as strengths. "Rodriguez," she called softly, "how much longer can we run the reactor at minimal power before risking permanent damage?" "Maybe 6 hours. After that, we start losing capability we can't get back." Chen nodded in the darkness. 6 hours. They'd have to move before then, find a way to strike back at the Vraxian fleet. But for now, They waited in the dark, letting their enemies waste time and energy hunting for ghosts, while the Determination's crew remembered how to fight like their ancestors, with patience, cunning, and the simple reliability of aged steel. The emergency lighting in engineering cast everything in a red glow as Chief Rodriguez traced his fingers along a complex diagram drawn on the back of an old maintenance manual. Around him, the Determination's reactor hummed at minimal power, barely keeping their essential systems running. "It's crazy," Lisa said, studying the calculations her chief had sketched out. "But the math works." The resonance cascade would look exactly like a containment failure. Rodriguez nodded, adding another series of equations to his diagram. The Mark VII's containment field was always unstable at certain frequencies. That's why they replaced them in the newer ships. "But if we tune it just right, we could fake our own death," Lisa finished. "Make it look like our reactor is going critical." The chief engineer activated a small portable display, showing a simulation of their plan. The reactor's unique oscillation patterns would create a burst of energy that perfectly mimicked a catastrophic containment breach. To the Vraxians' advanced sensors, it would appear as if the Determination was about to experience a complete reactor failure. "Bridge, this is engineering," Rodriguez called over the comm. "Captain, I need you to see something." Minutes later, Captain Chen stood in engineering with Lieutenant Powell, watching the simulation play out. The display showed their reactor signature flaring brilliantly before appearing to collapse in on itself. "How real would it look?" Chen asked, her eyes fixed on the readouts. "Real enough to fool their quantum sensors," Rodriguez replied. "The Mark VII has a unique energy signature when it fails. Every engineering officer in the fleet had to study it during training because it was responsible for 3 destroyer losses back in 42. Powell leaned closer to the display. "But we're not actually going to lose containment. No, we're going to ride the resonance wave right to the edge, make it look like we're losing control. The Vraxians will detect what appears to be a dying ship, but will actually be building up for an attack." Chen studied the equations covering the maintenance manual. "The risk." Rodriguez took a deep breath. "If we miscalculate the resonance frequency by even 0.5%, we'll get a real containment breach instead of a simulated one. The reactor core would collapse, and we'd have about 3 seconds to appreciate the irony." The captain walked over to the reactor control panel, placing her hand on the worn metal surface. The Determination's heart had been beating steady for 3 decades, outlasting all the newer, more advanced designs that were supposed to replace it. How long to set it up? 2 hours to reconfigure the containment field generators. Another hour for testing. The tricky part will be maintaining the cascade at exactly the right frequency. Too low, and they won't believe it. Too high. He didn't need to finish the sentence. "What about power for weapons?" Powell asked. "We'll be vulnerable during the buildup." "That's the beautiful part," Rodriguez said, allowing himself a small smile. "The resonance cascade will actually store energy. When we release it, we'll have about 30 seconds of power levels higher than this ship was ever designed to handle. Every system on board will be running hot." Chen turned to Powell. "Can you get a targeting solution in 30 seconds? With that much power, I can get 3. The tactical officer's eyes gleamed with possibilities. "Their shields won't be at full strength if they think we're dying. 1 good shot might be all we need." The captain nodded slowly, her decision crystallizing. "Do it." "But Rodriguez," she fixed the engineer with a stern look. "I want triple redundancies on those containment calculations. We're not actually blowing ourselves up today." "Aye, Captain." "Lisa, get the backup generators online. We'll need them for the initial power spike." Rodriguez turned back to his diagrams, already mentally mapping out the modifications they'd need. As Chen headed back to the bridge, she heard Rodriguez humming an old Spacer's tune while he worked. The sound echoed through the engineering compartment, mixing with the steady pulse of their reactor. It was an ancient melody about clever foxes and hunting hounds, about playing dead until the perfect moment to strike. The Determination had one last trick to play, and if they got it right, the Vraxians would learn that sometimes the most dangerous enemy was the one you thought was already beaten. Containment field fluctuation at 18%. Rodriguez reported from engineering, his voice steady despite the sweat beading on his forehead. Temperature climbing in the reactor core. Captain Chen watched the tactical display as 4 Vraxian ships moved closer to investigate their apparent malfunction. The crystalline vessels approached cautiously, their formations perfect as always. They were being careful, but their sensors would be telling them exactly what they expected to see: a primitive human vessel suffering a catastrophic reactor failure. 19%. Rodriguez called out. Shield harmonics are starting to destabilize. The bridge crew sat tensely at their stations, each watching their displays as the carefully controlled deception played out. They'd scattered pieces of debris ahead of time. Panels that looked like they'd been blown free by internal explosions, trailing clouds of vented plasma that masked their true power readings. They're broadcasting a message, Park announced from communications, offering to accept our surrender and evacuate our crew before the reactor breaches. Chen allowed herself a tight smile. How considerate of them. Time to completion. 23%. Rodriguez replied. 4 minutes until we hit the threshold. Powell's hands hovered over her weapons console, already plotting firing solutions. The pre-programmed debris they'd scattered wasn't just for show. Each piece had been carefully positioned to serve as an improvised mine when the moment came. Vraxian ships entering optimal range, Powell reported. Their weapons are powered down. They're diverting energy to tractor beams. The deck plates vibrated subtly as the Determination's reactor pushed closer to its apparent breaking point. Chen could feel the tension mounting with each passing second. Everything hinged on timing now. Too soon, and the Vraxians would see through their ruse. Too late, and they risked an actual containment breach. 28%. Rodriguez called out. Core temperature reaching critical levels. Simulated plasma leaks in sections 12 through 15. The nearest Vraxian ship was close enough now that Chen could see the intricate patterns in its crystalline hull through the bridge viewport. Their enemies were probably congratulating themselves on their mercy, preparing to salvage what they could from the primitive vessel before it destroyed itself. 35%. Point of no return in 30 seconds. Chen keyed her comm. All hands, braced for emergency maneuvers. Weapon crews, stand by. The Vraxian ships moved into a standard rescue formation, positioning themselves to catch any escape pods that might launch. Their perfect precision was about to become their undoing. 40%. Rodriguez's voice carried an edge of strain now. Ready to trigger the cascade on your mark. Chen waited 3 more heartbeats, watching the enemy ships settle into exactly the position she'd hoped for. All stations. Execute. The Determination's reactor screamed as Rodriguez released the carefully controlled resonance cascade. Energy surged through the ship's systems, pushing them far beyond their designed limits. To the Vraxian sensors, it would look like the final catastrophic overload of a failing core. Instead, every weapon on the ship fired simultaneously. Coil guns thundered, launching precisely aimed projectiles. Plasma torpedoes streaked through space, their targeting systems taking advantage of the enemy's lowered shields. The pre-positioned debris exploded outward, turning into a lethal cloud of shrapnel. The nearest Vraxian ship shattered almost instantly, its perfect crystalline form breaking apart as multiple impacts struck at precisely calculated weak points. A second vessel, caught completely off guard, lost its entire propulsion section to the barrage. Energy spike. Powell called out. 2 more enemy ships powering up weapons. Roll port. Chen ordered. Rodriguez, give me everything you can. The Determination spun on its axis, bringing fresh weapons to bear even as the reactor's excess energy began to fade. A third Vraxian ship, its shields finely raised but poorly harmonized, took heavy damage from their second volley. The fourth managed to launch a single shot before emergency protocols forced it to retreat, its hull integrity compromised. When the energy storm cleared, 3 Vraxian ships drifted powerless in space, their once beautiful forms now broken and dark. The 4th limped away, trailing crystalline fragments like drops of blood in the void. "Reactor stabilizing," Rodriguez reported, exhaustion clear in his voice. "We'll need at least an hour before we can try anything like that again." Chen nodded, already studying the tactical display for signs of the remaining enemy vessels. They'd bloodied the Vraxian's nose, but the fight was far from over. "Damage report. Port side took some hits," Powell replied. "Main weapons array is offline, but we're still in the fight, Captain." "Good," Chen said, "because I doubt they're going to fall for that trick twice." The holographic display in the Determination's tactical room showed their situation in stark detail. 4 crystalline markers represented the remaining Vraxian ships, now arranged in a defensive formation around their flagship. The larger vessel's hull sparkled with newly reinforced energy matrices, its weapons primed and ready. "They're not taking any chances now," Powell said, studying the display. "Standard targeting systems are useless against those enhanced shields. Even with our analog computers, I can't get a solid lock." Captain Chen stood with her arms crossed, watching the tactical projection. The Vraxians had adapted quickly after their last encounter, modifying their shield frequencies and maintaining constant power to their defensive systems. No more tricks or surprises. "Rodriguez, what's our status?" The chief engineer looked up from his diagnostic panel, dark circles under his eyes from hours of emergency repairs. "Main weapons are still offline. We've got maneuvering thrusters at 60%, and the reactor's stable, but we can't risk another resonance cascade. One more shock like that would tear the containment fields apart." Chen nodded slowly, her mind working through possibilities. The Determination's thick hull plating bore the scars of their previous battles: scorched armor, impact craters, and stretched metal that should have failed hours ago. But the old ship had been built in an era when vessels needed to survive more than just energy weapons. "Tell me about our structural integrity," she said suddenly. Rodriguez blinked, then pulled up a new set of diagrams. "Better than it should be, actually. These old Marathon-class destroyers were over-engineered. The hull's a sandwich of reinforced alloys designed to withstand old-style nuclear detonations. Modern ships don't need that kind of protection because of their energy shields. But we still have it," Chen finished. She turned to Powell. "What's the mass of the Determination compared to their flagship?" The tactical officer's eyes widened as she realized what her captain was suggesting. "We're heavier. A lot heavier. Their ships are built around their shield generators. The physical structure is relatively light." "Like a crystal wine glass," Rodriguez muttered. "Beautiful, perfect, but hit it just right." Chen pressed a control, zooming in on the enemy flagship. "Those reinforced shields will stop any conventional weapon we have left, but they're designed to deflect energy and spread out the force of impacts. What happens if we don't give them time to distribute the kinetic force?" "You want to ram them?" Powell asked, her voice a mix of disbelief and growing excitement. "At combat speed. Their shields are tuned to stop weapons," Chen said. "But we're not a weapon. We're 30,000 tons of reinforced hull plating moving at relativistic velocity. By the time their shields recognize us as a threat, we'll already be through them." Rodriguez was already running calculations. The bow section is the strongest part of the ship. If we transfer all remaining power to structural integrity fields and inertial dampeners, it could work. We take massive damage, but their hull would break before ours. "How close would we need to get?" Powell asked. "Point-blank range," Chen replied. "No time for them to adjust shield harmonics or alter course. We'll only get one shot at this." The tactical room fell silent as her officers considered the plan. It was desperate, perhaps even suicidal, but it played to their ship's strengths. The Determination had been built to take punishment that would destroy more advanced vessels. Engineering crews to crash stations, Rodriguez said finally. "We'll need to reinforce every frame between here and the bow. And Captain, We should evacuate all non-essential personnel to the aft sections. If the bow crumples. Chen nodded grimly. Make it happen. Powell, plot us a course that keeps us behind this debris field until the last possible moment. We'll need every bit of cover to get close enough. As her officers moved to their tasks, Chen stayed in the tactical room, studying the enemy formation. The Vraxians had built their ships to be perfect, optimizing every system for maximum efficiency. But sometimes survival didn't come down to perfection. Sometimes it came down to simple physics, to mass and velocity, and the strength of old steel. All hands, she announced shipwide. Prepare for extreme maneuvers. This old girl has one last lesson to teach about human engineering. All hands, brace for impact in 30 seconds. Chen's voice echoed through the Determination's corridors as the old ship burst from behind the debris field. Ahead of them, the Vraxian flagship's crystalline hull blazed with shield energy, its perfect geometric forms preparing for what their quantum computers must have calculated as another desperate attack. 15,000 kilometers, Powell called out from her station. They're bringing weapons to bear. Evasive pattern Delta, Chen ordered. Make them think we're trying for another bombing run. The Determination wheeled through space like a dancer, her movements deliberately telegraphing an attempt to line up weapons that everyone aboard knew were disabled. The Vraxian ships responded exactly as predicted, shifting their formation to counter the apparent threat. 10,000 kilometers. Their targeting systems are locked on our weapons ports. Rodriguez's voice came through from engineering, strain evident in his tone. Structural integrity fields at maximum. Bow plating reinforced. We got about 20 seconds of full power to the inertial dampeners when you need it. 5,000 kilometers. They're launching interceptors. Chen's hands tightened on her command chair. Initiate attack pattern Omega. Full power to forward shields. The Determination's engines flared brilliant blue as she suddenly changed course, no longer hiding her true intention. The Vraxian flagship's perfect defenses began to shift, but they were milliseconds too late in recognizing the real threat. 3,000 kilometers. Their shields are adapting. Transfer all power to structural integrity and inertial dampeners, Chen commanded. Brace for impact. Time seemed to slow as the distance closed. Chen could see the moment of realization in the Vraxian response. Their interceptors breaking formation, their flagship's weapons redirecting, their shields trying to reconfigure from energy deflection to kinetic absorption. But physics was physics, and 30,000 tons of reinforced human engineering was about to teach them a lesson about simple momentum. The impact, when it came, was almost silent. For a fraction of a second, the Vraxian flagship's shields held, creating a brilliant cascade of energy across their crystalline hull. Then physics reasserted itself. The Determination's reinforced bow, built to withstand nuclear detonations, punctured through the weakened shield matrix like a spear through glass. Hull breach on decks 1 through 5. Powell shouted over the screech of tearing metal. Bow structure holding. The Vraxian flagship's perfect crystalline form shattered around their point of impact, elegant geometric patterns breaking apart as the Determination's massive bulk drove through their vessel. Emergency force fields snapped into place across the human ship's damaged sections, preserving atmosphere even as they continued their devastating charge. Their power core is destabilizing, Rodriguez reported. We need to break free before. All engines full reverse. Chen ordered. Emergency separation. The Determination's engines roared as they pushed away from the mortally wounded flagship. Behind them, the Vraxian vessel's crystal lattice began to collapse, its once beautiful form now a fractured, ruined, bleeding atmosphere, and debris into space. Remaining enemy ships are breaking formation, Powell announced, wonder in her voice. They're retreating. Through the bridge viewport, Chen watched as the surviving Vraxian vessels disappeared into faster-than-light jumps, leaving their ruined flagship behind. The message was clear. Whatever tactical advantage they might have held wasn't worth facing an enemy that would turn their own ship into a weapon. Damage report, Chen called out, allowing herself to finally relax slightly in her chair. "Bow section is a mess," Rodriguez replied. "We'll need months in space dock." But the old girl held together, "Captain, just like she was built to." "Message coming in from the colony," Park announced. They're cheering, Captain. The orbital feeds are showing the whole thing. Everyone saw what we did." Chen smiled, looking around at her exhausted but proud crew. "Send word to the colony that the HS Determination sends her regards. And someone please tell Fleet Command that we could use a home. I think this old ship has earned her rest." As the adrenaline of battle faded, Chen watched the stars through their viewport, now visible through the clearing debris of combat. They had won not through superior technology or overwhelming force, but through the same qualities that had taken humanity to the stars in the first place: determination, ingenuity, and the simple strength of well-forged steel.